2 months ago, my life took a turn I never expected. My girlfriend, the person I care about most in the world, was assaulted in a park. That night shattered her, and us, in ways I'm still struggling to process. When she came home, she was inconsolable. She refused to report it, wouldn't go to the police, and avoided the hospital altogether. I wanted to help her, to protect her, but I couldn't force her to do anything. Instead, I just stayed by her side, trying to be her rock while she crumbled. It was heartbreaking to watch. She stopped eating properly, barely slept, and woke up most nights in a state of terror, crying, screaming, or both. I tried everything I could to comfort her, but nothing seemed to help. She would sit for hours, staring at nothing, trapped in her thoughts. She was falling apart, and I felt powerless to stop it. Eventually, we started therapy. It felt like the only thing I could do that might help her climb out of the pit she'd fallen into. She has a history of depression, so I've always worried about her mental health, but this was worse than anything I'd seen before. I wanted her to know I'd be there for her, no matter what. Even when I felt drained, even when I wasn't sure I could keep going, I stayed. I needed her to feel safe, even if I didn't have the answers to her pain. Then, last week, everything changed. We found out she was pregnant. When we saw the test results, it was like the ground disappeared beneath me. I felt a mix of emotions I can barely describe: anger, sorrow, despair. The timeline was clear. I had been out of the country for work in the months before the assault, so there was no doubt, the baby wasn't mine. She was absolutely certain it was her attackers. We had clung to the hope that maybe the symptoms were something else, but the pregnancy test was undeniable. She broke down again when the realization hit. This wasn't just about the physical toll of carrying a pregnancy. It was about what that baby represented, a living, breathing reminder of the worst thing that had ever happened to her. The guilt, the trauma, the loss of control, all of it seemed to hit her at once. She said she felt trapped, like there was no way out of the nightmare. And I didn't know how to help her. We talked about it, probably the hardest conversation we've ever had. She's a devout Catholic, and her faith is a cornerstone of who she is. At first, she agreed that an abortion was the best path forward. It seemed like the only way for her to start healing, to regain some sense of control over her life. But after a long conversation with her mother, everything shifted. Her mother told her, in no uncertain terms, that abortion was a sin she could never atone for. She said it would haunt her for the rest of her life. After that, my girlfriend decided to keep the baby. She told me she believed every life is sacred, no matter the circumstances. I could see the conflict in her eyes. Her faith told her one thing, but her trauma screamed something else entirely. Watching her struggle with that decision was agonizing. I knew I couldn't force her to make a different choice, but I also knew where I stood. I told her flat out that I couldn't raise this child. I couldn't be a father to a baby conceived through violence, a constant reminder of what had happened. My words felt cold and harsh, but I needed to be honest with her. She cried and begged me to stay. Her tears tore me apart. I hated hurting her, but I couldn't lie to her or myself. I told her that it was her decision to make, but there would be consequences. If she kept the baby, I would have to leave. If she chose an abortion, I'd stay and support her through it. There was no middle ground. In the end, she couldn't choose either. She wanted me to stay, but she couldn't bring herself to terminate the pregnancy. We reached an impasse. Finally, I told her it was over. I had to walk away, even though it felt like I was ripping my heart out. Yesterday, she called me. Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying for hours. She begged me to listen, so I did. I told her I cared about her, that I always would, and that I was willing to hear her out. She told me about the days following our breakup, how she'd called her mom, hoping for comfort and guidance. What she got instead was pressure, relentless, suffocating pressure. Her mother told her that abortion would sever their relationship. She said that if my girlfriend went through with it, she would no longer consider her a daughter. She told her that I was manipulating her into killing the baby, painting me as the villain in this already devastating story. My girlfriend was shattered. Torn between her trauma and her faith, her own mother's condemnation made her feel like she was losing everything. She told me how her mother's words echoed in her head, making her question everything. The guilt weighed her down, and the ultimatum left her feeling trapped. Eventually, she decided to text her mom. With trembling hands, she typed out a message saying she planned to go through with the abortion. She hoped, somehow, her mother would understand. Maybe she'd even offer some small measure of support. Instead, the response was immediate and brutal. Her mom blocked her, cut her off completely. That was when she called me. She told me everything. She said she'd scheduled the abortion for 3 weeks from now. We talked about it, and I reassured her that my boundaries hadn't been manipulation, they were about what I could handle, not about controlling her. She said my honesty had helped her see more clearly. If I hadn't been firm, she might have kept the baby, only to realize later it wasn't what she wanted or needed. She thanked me for standing by her, even when things were unbearable. She said she felt like a massive weight had been lifted, even though she knew the road ahead would still be difficult. Her words broke me. She told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to her, that even without her mother, if she had me, she could get through anything. I cried. I cried because I love her, and I hate that she's gone through this. I cried because, in another life, I would have stayed, no matter what, even if it meant raising a child I resented. But I know this is the right decision for both of us. It has to be. As the days passed, I reflected on everything that had led us here. I made the original post because I needed validation. I needed to hear from others that I wasn't a monster for setting those boundaries, for walking away from a situation that felt unbearable. The response was overwhelming. Many people shared their support, assuring me that standing firm wasn't cruel, it was necessary. Others condemned me, calling me a baby killer or worse. But the support outweighed the hate, and it helped me see that standing my ground wasn't just about me. It was about protecting both of us from a future neither of us could survive. That support helped me come to terms with the decision. It made me realize that I wasn't alone in thinking that her mother's actions were manipulative and cruel. The idea of a parent putting their beliefs above their child's well-being sickened me. I still couldn't wrap my head around how someone could prioritize religious dogma over their own daughter's mental health and safety. It wasn't just wrong, it was inhumane. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. Some commenters accused me of being heartless. They questioned whether I'd truly loved her if I could walk away so easily. But it wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I didn't walk away because I stopped loving her, I walked away because I did love her, and I couldn't see another way to make things right. Staying and pretending I could handle something I couldn't would have only hurt her more in the long run. Then came the fallout from her mother. I didn't expect her to take the news well, but I also didn't expect her to escalate things to the level she did. Last Saturday, I opened my door to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. My stomach dropped. They asked if I was who I said I was, and when I confirmed it, they told me they were there to check on my girlfriend. I called her over, my voice trembling, and she appeared in the doorway, her face pale with confusion and fear. The officers explained that they needed to speak to her privately. They separated us, one took her to the living room, and the other pulled me into the bedroom. The officer questioning me asked how long she had been staying with me, whether she had any contact with others, and whether she'd left the house at all recently. His questions felt invasive, almost accusatory, but I answered each one truthfully. Finally, I asked what this was about. The officer told me they had received a report expressing concern for my girlfriend's safety. When I pressed him on who had made the report, he said he couldn't disclose that information. But I already knew. My girlfriend confirmed my suspicions when the officers left. Her mother had called the police, claiming I was abusive and that my girlfriend might be in danger. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut. I was livid. Her mother wasn't just trying to guilt her into keeping the pregnancy, she was actively trying to sabotage our lives. The audacity of it left me speechless. I told my girlfriend I wanted to press charges against her mother for harassment or defamation, anything to hold her accountable for the chaos she was causing. But my girlfriend begged me not to. She insisted it would only escalate things and that her mom just needed time to calm down. I didn't agree, but I relented for her sake. The next day, my girlfriend called her mother to plead with her to stop interfering. Their conversation lasted less than 2 minutes before the sobbing started. I walked into the room to find my girlfriend in tears, holding her phone with shaking hands. I took the phone from her and held her for a moment before putting it to my ear. Her mother was still on the line, and I didn't hesitate. "You're a disgrace of a mother," I told her before hanging up. My girlfriend cried in my arms for what felt like hours. When she finally calmed down, she told me what her mother had said. Her mom had accused her of damning herself to hell if she went through with the abortion. She even claimed she would be cut off from her entire family, including her late father, who her mom insisted was in heaven, despite his history of abuse and alcoholism. It was manipulative, cruel, and downright toxic. I tried to lighten the mood. I joked that if she was going to hell, she should save me a seat, we'd make it a party. She gave me a small smile through her tears, and for a brief moment, it felt like things might be okay. The abortion was scheduled for 3 weeks after her decision, but those weeks felt like an eternity. My girlfriend was haunted by doubt and fear, but she also seemed determined. She attended counseling and spoke with medical professionals about what to expect. She wanted to be as prepared as possible, even though she knew nothing could fully prepare her for what was to come. When the day finally arrived, I took her to the clinic. She opted for a surgical abortion. The procedure was relatively quick and painless, and within a few hours, she was back home. That's when the floodgates opened. She cried harder than I'd ever seen her cry before. I held her as the pain, relief, and grief poured out of her all at once. She told me she felt like a massive weight had been lifted, like she could finally breathe again. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She said she knew there was still a long road ahead, but this felt like the first step toward healing. The constant reminder of the attack was gone, and she could finally start reclaiming her life. We took the rest of the week off work to process everything. We needed time to just be together, away from the noise and judgment of the world. We went camping, hoping the peace of nature would help us reset. Of course, it rained, because when does life ever go as planned? But even the rain couldn't dampen our spirits. We huddled together in the tent, listening to the raindrops against the fabric, and for the first time in a long time, we felt safe. While we sat there, she opened up about her struggles. She talked about the pain, the moments when she felt like she couldn't go on, and how this experience had changed her. But she also talked about how relieved she was to have made the choice she did. She said she felt stronger, more resilient, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Her strength amazed me. Despite everything, she had survived. And I realized that as long as we had each other, we could survive anything. When we got back from our camping trip, things felt a little lighter. It wasn't that everything was suddenly fine, far from it. My girlfriend still had moments of sadness, of doubt. But there was also a sense of relief, a quiet hope that had been missing for months. She was starting to look forward instead of backward, and I could see the weight of her trauma slowly beginning to lift. It gave me hope, too. Then her mother called. We had agreed that if her mom tried to contact her, she would either hang up or pass the phone to me. The goal was to protect her from further emotional manipulation. But when the call came through, she answered out of instinct. The moment she heard her mom's voice, she froze. Panic flashed across her face, and she quickly handed me the phone without saying a word. I took the phone, bracing myself for whatever venom her mom was about to spew. She didn't disappoint. Her mother launched into an immediate tirade, demanding to know if the abortion had been carried out. I stayed calm and confirmed that, yes, it had gone perfectly. Her reaction was as vile as I'd expected. She unleashed a stream of curses, her voice dripping with hatred and disgust. She called me every name in the book, accusing me of leading her daughter to sin and damning her to eternal punishment. I let her rant for about a minute, the absurdity of it all almost making me laugh. When she finally paused for breath, I calmly said, "How very Jesus of you," and hung up. My girlfriend didn't find my sarcasm amusing, but I could tell she was relieved. The heavy silence that followed felt like a small victory. Her mother's opinion no longer had the power to crush her, and that was progress. Still, the encounter left us both shaken. Her mother had proven time and again that she cared more about her rigid beliefs than her daughter's well-being. It was a painful realization for my girlfriend, but I think it also helped her see things more clearly. She no longer needed her mother's approval to validate her choices. She had made the decision that was right for her, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, we focused on rebuilding. My girlfriend continued therapy, diving deeper into her trauma and learning how to navigate life after the assault and the abortion. She told me the sessions were hard, often leaving her emotionally drained, but they were helping. Slowly but surely, she was beginning to heal. As for me, I stayed by her side, doing whatever I could to support her. There were moments when I felt useless, like nothing I did could ease her pain. But then there were other moments, small, quiet victories, when I saw glimpses of the woman she used to be. Those moments reminded me why I loved her so much and why I believed we could get through this together. The memory of her mother's betrayal still lingered in the background, like an unwelcome shadow. Every so often, we'd talk about it, how someone who was supposed to protect and nurture her had instead caused her so much pain. My girlfriend admitted that she still felt conflicted. As much as she resented her mom's actions, a part of her still longed for the relationship they used to have. She missed her family, even though she knew they wouldn't support her choices. I told her that her feelings were valid, that it was okay to grieve the loss of her mother's support. But I also reminded her that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love and loyalty. She had me, and as long as she wanted me by her side, I wasn't going anywhere. One evening, we sat down to discuss the future. She brought up the idea of moving away, starting fresh in a new city where we could leave the painful memories behind. The thought of uprooting our lives was daunting, but I could see how much she needed a clean slate. After everything she had been through, she deserved a chance to rebuild without the weight of her past hanging over her. We haven't made any concrete plans yet, but the idea feels right. We're both ready to leave this chapter behind and start writing a new one. Looking back on everything we've endured, I'm struck by how much we've grown, not just as individuals, but as a couple. This experience has tested us in ways I never imagined, and while it's been unimaginably hard, it's also brought us closer. We've learned to lean on each other, to communicate openly, and to stand firm in our convictions. I know there are still challenges ahead. Healing isn't a linear process, and there will be setbacks. But I also know we're stronger now. My girlfriend is one of the bravest, most resilient people I've ever known, and I'm so proud of her for taking control of her life and making the choices that were right for her. As for her mother, I've decided to let it go, for now. I still believe her actions were unforgivable, but I also know that pressing charges or engaging in a drawn-out battle would only bring more stress into our lives. My priority is my girlfriend's well-being, and right now, she needs peace, not more conflict. But if her mother crosses the line again, I won't hesitate to take action. To everyone who offered support and advice, thank you. Your words helped me find clarity in a time of chaos, and I'll always be grateful for that. To those who criticized me or called me names, I won't pretend your comments didn't sting, but they also made me more certain of my choices. I know I did what was right for myself and for the woman I love. Life is messy and complicated, but it's also full of second chances. As long as we keep moving forward, I believe we'll be okay.